wanted to share these two project instruments with you, and these are two instruments that I've owned for a very long time, since I was a teenager. Originally, they were a banjo and a mandolin. You can see they're not quite a banjo and a mandolin anymore. Now the banjo, it was going to be thrown away. It was, someone had sort of pulled it out of a garbage pretty much, and they were going to discard it. And I wanted to learn how to play banjo when I was a teenager. So I said, hey, I'd be happy to fix that up and get it working. But it was in such rough shape. There wasn't really that much I could do, especially as a teenager with no experience fixing instruments. So the primary issues were that the nut height were way too high. The frets, they're actually quite sharp and uncomfortable. They were very angular, despite this being a very old Liro banjo. The frets were quite angular and sharp, so it was extremely uncomfortable to play. It was angled, had a sharp edges there, and all along here were edges that were quite uncomfortable to play. The nut was too high. The truss rod is not adjustable. Loosely they call it a truss rod. It's reinforced steel. It's made in Korea. And there's always been a bow to the neck that I had no way of adjusting. I didn't really understand how to adjust that as a kid, and I had heard horror stories of people trying to steam their banjos and then the banjo catching on fire. So I didn't want to attempt anything like that. So I tried to learn how to play banjo all throughout growing up, but it was extremely unpleasant. So the sound that came out of this was very unpleasant. It was painful to play, so I never wanted to play it. The action was just way too high. Even though I had purchased a quality bridge, I had replaced the drum head on the banjo, but it was never satisfying to play. It was always uncomfortable, so I never properly learned how to play banjo. On the opposite side of that, I had purchased my first mandolin as a teenager. I think I paid probably around 50 or 60 US dollars, and it was a Rogue A-style mandolin. I believe I purchased that from musiciansfriend.com, which is a very cool website, and it to this day is the worst instrument that I've ever played. So primarily what was wrong with it, and you're going to see this on any cheap instrument, is the nut was way too high, far too high, so fretting any of the strings was absolute misery. The bridge, low quality bridge, all the components are just very low quality. They're the bottom of the barrel. It's what a teenager can buy for $50 to $60 with their first job. And the bridge was spongy. It's just a spongy, soft wood, and I couldn't lower the bridge enough. Even though you wind down the bridge, there was nothing you could do to make this instrument playable. It was absolutely miserable. The tone was awful. It was just the worst. It was really unpleasant to listen to. And so for many years I owned a mandolin, and I never learned how to play, despite trying to come back to that mandolin and play it. I couldn't. It was really terrible. And unfortunately that sort of ruined the banjo and the mandolin for me for many years. But I kept those instruments with me because I suppose as a man I'm a bit stubborn and thick-headed, as men tend to be, and I refused to, be defeated by these. So as I got into doing work as a cowboy luthier and repairing and modifying instruments, I kept these two instruments at the back of my mind. And one day I looked at them and I said, oh, I'm not going to let these things just be a sort of, something that I failed at some point in my life. So I thought, I'm getting into modifying and customizing instruments and repairing antiques, so I thought, why don't I try to do something? So I wanted a banjolin. That's just something you play as a mandolin, but it's got the body of a banjo, so you get a banjo sound, or a similar banjo sound, but tonally it's very different. It's characteristically and in terms of its sonic presence, it's totally different from a banjo. There's no similarity in terms of how you play the two instruments, and they occupy a different sonic space. So I really wanted a banjolin, and I thought I'd been searching around for some antiques to fix up, and I tracked down a beautiful Houghton & Sons 1940s banjolin that I repaired and restored, and I enjoyed playing that. But this, I wanted a sound that I could customize and create myself, something that I could determine, this is what I want this instrument to sound like. So basically what I did is I chopped off the neck from my mandolin. So if you have a look here, I chopped off the mandolin neck, and I'll get closer here. You can see I actually originally didn't have intentions to keep the mandolin body. I just set it aside. So I took the neck off, and I mounted it to that coordinating rod inside the banjo there. And you can see this beautiful low action I was able to achieve with that. I'm using a maple and ebony capped bridge for that, and I also added this nice arm guard, which helps keep your arm from resting on the resonating surface. So what I like best about this instrument, and it's one that I do actually use, I compose a fair bit of music, I play in various music clubs, and I haven't taken this to a club yet, but it is something that I use in my musical recordings. In terms of playability, it's taking lemons and making lemonade, isn't it? So I was able to create something that has the exact sound that I wanted. I wanted something warm and with tonal clarity. There, at some point I will have to do something about my bridge here, because I'm accidentally cut the slot for this very highest E string. I accidentally cut the slot a little too wide, so you can hear it. Unfortunately, it imparts a bit of a wolf tone on that string, whereas the string next to it, it doesn't have that issue. If you play them together, if one of them's a little out of tune, it becomes exacerbated. If you play a little lower, it's less present. To me, it's something that it's not a huge priority, but it's something that I'll fix at some point in the future. Not a big deal. All I have to do is just get a new bridge and then carve that out again. Or I could just get a very, very fine file, and I can just lower the slot there, but I would have to make a little adjustment to the other strings as well to make sure it all feels and plays evenly. The action is very low, so it's extremely comfortable to play. The intonation's quite good, and again, you just adjust the saddle as need be. So you can see I've lost a few frets from the bottom of, or from the top of the neck, because I had to fit that on here. So it was a challenge. What I did was I laid the mandolin next to the banjo, and I lined up where the bridge was sitting on that, so I could make sure that wherever I cut that, I would be able to sit this somewhere. Now, I didn't want the bridge sitting too far down, as that would affect the tone, the resonance, the ability of the resonating membrane to pick up those vibrations. It gets more and more muffled the farther down on the face you go. Ideally, it would be nice to have it sitting higher up if it's just a bit more central, just a little bit more, but that was all the space that I had to work with the banjo, with the mandolin neck. So I'm very happy with this instrument. Because they are higher tension strings, they are more full-bodied and more robust, and they have a darker color to the voice as opposed to a typical 5-string banjo. But it is a shorter scale, and generally a shorter scaled instrument has a sweeter tone to it. So if you'd like to hear more from this instrument, do let me know. Ignore that top thing there. What I originally tried to do was I wanted to set it up with 3 courses that were 3 pairs, so a bit like a tricordia, or basically a mandolin that has 3 sets of 4 courses. But there, I eventually abandoned that idea and experimented with a bit, but it wasn't quite good. And mind you, this instrument was falling apart already, which influenced my decision to chop it up. The neck was actually becoming separated from the body. So it was very poorly built. The materials aren't great, it's just some sort of plywood. Um, so, and I was left with a banjo neck. So I had to remove the banjo neck. It's always been miserable to play. And I had a mandolin body left, and I was just, you know, some nights you sit up late and you're sort of staring out the windows up in the sky, and you're wondering what you should do next. And I guess what I decided to do next was take my leftover pieces and slap them together. So what I've got here is I suppose this is referred to as a banjola, which would be a wooden-bodied banjo. Compared to a typical 5-string banjo with a typical resonating membrane, it has a much softer, much quieter sound, but is pleasantly warm, and I quite like the voice of this. So I haven't used this in any recordings yet. I've been working on this for a while, and it's quite ugly. I wouldn't take this anywhere to play it, and in order to actually get enough transference of vibrations, I had to remove the internal bracing. So these acoustic instruments have bracing in them to reinforce the top so they don't cave in as the strings apply pressure onto the top. So in order to do that, I had to drill this large hole here in order to get my fingers or my hands inside. So I was able to get my hands inside just enough, so I was able to get my hands in about that much, and just with the tips of my fingers I was just tearing out the bracing. So it was very difficult, and that took an hour or two, just very carefully getting my fingers in there and snapping the bracing by applying perpendicular force. And I was able to remove enough of the bracing, but I left just very thin layers of the bracing in there just for some reinforcement. But this is a thick top. I can see 3 sheets of plywood there, but it's one of those sheets is extremely thick and spongy. I can see that it's quite porous. So I still feel like it would benefit from heavier gauge strings. I put heavy gauge banjo strings on here. I'm still not getting that much resonance out of it. I can hear that the instrument wants to resonate more and it wants heavier strings. At some point I'll do that, but when you put heavier strings on a banjo instrument, you're going to sacrifice your dexterity. The whole point of a banjo is you're able to do that pretty quickly, and you're able to do this pretty quickly. So when you put heavier strings on there, it's going to limit your ability to play dexterously. You're going to have to push harder, and it means that that's basically going to slow you down. You're going to tire out faster. So if you are in a jam session or playing a set, it's not going to be that fun. It also makes sliding a bit more uncomfortable as you have to push harder. So as I've gained experience as a cowboy luthier over the years, I'm not formally trained, so maybe don't trust me to work on your $3,000 guitar, but if you found a junker and you don't know what to do with it, I'll fix that up for you. What I did was I rounded off the edges here. There's absolutely no sharpness. I can run my hand up and down there and there's no discomfort at all. And I softened and rounded all of the frets so you can run your fingers up and down that as well. There's no sharp edges anymore. So unfortunately, I really struggled to get a way to mount this neck. I would really like the neck to be leaning farther back, but there was nothing in there. I had to put some blocks of wood in there to reinforce it. And at the end of the day, glue wasn't doing it, so I had to put that in there, and that's basically the angle that I was able to get this to sit at. I didn't have much to work with, really. Also, I have a full-time job, so I didn't have a huge amount of spare time. It was just late at night, and I was wondering what I should do just to wind down for a few hours. So this is this is an ebony bridge that I took off a mandolin. Eventually I'll cut off the edges. You want the least amount of mass on your resonating surface as much as possible. They've got these edges here. If I had time, I would have just sawed those off. It's no big deal. The edges don't need to be there. They're just dampening the vibrations, really. And this is bone that I sort of soaked in coffee and tea, a mixture of coffee tea, to darken the saddle, just to get a different color on it. And visibly, it's ugly. You know, the neck was sitting on there on the when it was originally a mandolin. What I have considered, I have some sort of celluloid stuff, you know, like the pick guard material, and I was thinking of cutting something out, a shape to cover over this ugly stuff. I would really only go through the effort of making this visually look better if I was going to play this somewhere. It's not really loud enough to play anywhere, at a music club, on stage, in a jam session. It doesn't have the presence, not nearly loud enough. and there isn't really a reason. If I was going to play maybe alongside one or two other people and it was just acoustic stuff and we weren't hammering out loud tunes, maybe I would consider it. But it's got a voice that I think is quite nice and interesting, and it's unique enough to where I enjoy playing it. You know, if you're just sitting up at night and you don't really want a loud banjo, I would call it a night banjo. Now, where you are picking this guy really does make a significant difference. You're going to get much brighter there, but I quite prefer the tone up here, really. Now, ergonomically, it's very awkward because I'm accustomed to attacking the banjo from a particular angle. I'm accustomed to having the arm guard there, the armrest there, and attacking the banjo like that. So having this smaller shape, it's a smaller body, which means I'm sitting a bit closer to the strings like that, and I'm still figuring out a comfortable way to play this guy. The action is also not great, because I couldn't get the neck to fold back far enough. So when you get to the 5th fret, it's already a bit uncomfortable. So I try not to play too far up there. And really, if I wanted to play dexterously and I wanted the full range of the banjo, I'd go and play my banjo. If I had the opportunity to find a banjola, a proper one that was made properly as a banjola, yeah, absolutely, I'd like to play one. Hey, maybe I'll find one day. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you'll come back home again soon. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not going to ask for subscriptions or likes or Patreon, but I will ask that you look after yourself, you take care of yourself, and let's hope 2023 is going to be a great year for all of us, and much better than the past few years. You be well, take care of your loved ones, and I'll share more of my music with you again soon. All right, we'll see you.